I would never have predicted this. This is all I do.
This is Eric. He's an ETF expert that works at Bloomberg, and Blackrock, the world's largest asset manager controlling $9.5 trillion, just filed for a Bitcoin ETF. So I hit him up to get his honest opinion. Is it finally going to happen? What would this do to the price of Bitcoin? When do we find out if it passed? And he covers everything that you need to know with all the hidden details underneath the surface. I'm Luke Martin. This is the Sachs Podcast. Eric, I think this is the biggest Bitcoin news of the year. It's the biggest news Bitcoin could get. What is your initial reaction when this dropped? Yesterday, BlackRock files for a Bitcoin spot ETF. What's your take?
Shock. I would never have predicted this. And this is all I do. And I'm proud of some predictions I have made that have come true. But this is something I just could have never have predicted. When I saw the CoinDesk article, I didn't say it was not true. I just said, could this really be true? Like, I just was very skeptical. CoinDesk, though, props to them. They've had several great scoops. They are really on a journalism tear right now. And it turned out to be true. And then I was like, wait a second. BlackRock just doesn't randomly do things. They're just not that kind of company. And they know people at the SEC, people who have worked at the SEC work for them. They're not the kind of company that's like, oh, let's just throw our hat in the ring just in case. So that's why I became much more confident. My percentage odds that a spot approval would happen, say, in the next year would be like 1-2%. It's jumped to 30-40 just because of BlackRock, because of who they are, who they know, how they operate. This is a lot. This should be met with hope. That said, we have had our hope dashed before. We've seen filings come in, they all get rejected. So we've seen this movie before. But the only thing is we've never seen it with BlackRock. I can't understate how out of character this would be if they didn't have this all figured out. So we just got breaking news also that in the 19B4 filing, they're going to team up with NASDAQ for a surveillance sharing agreement with a crypto exchange. We don't know whether it's Binance or Coinbase, but this is a big deal because that would a surveillance sharing agreement is what the SEC said is needed to tamp down possibility of manipulation, because then you can share and surveil, right? That's huge. There's a couple wonky questions in there still, but the fact that they had that in there tells me, and they're teaming with NASDAQ, again, another giant, powerful company that is not messing around. So it makes me think that they worked all this out, or even NASDAQ might have came to them with this idea. I don't know. We're still figuring this out, but you got BlackRock and NASDAQ together in this filing. That's a really good sign. But again, I'm still not over 50% simply because I've seen so many times where you're like, oh, this should work or this could work. And then the SEC comes back and says, no, we're not ready. So that's sort of where we're at.
That would solve their one complaint they've always had, which is that Bitcoin can be manipulated. It trades on exchanges that can be manipulated. That is the sole reason that the SEC has not allowed these things to pass, and NASDAQ filing with them potentially solves it. That's a crazy detail.
It is. The other I'll go over the wonky detail. The surveillance sharing agreement, that's a tongue twister, was supposed to be with a exchange of significant size.
Okay.
So there's now a little debate. All this is playing out literally right now. We're going back and forth with some smart people on Twitter about whether Coinbase would be considered significant size. Somebody's saying it would have to be them with Binance. They didn't name the exchange, but they're using Coinbase as the custodian, so maybe it goes to think that they would use them as the exchange. But if it's Binance, that could be good too. But Binance is in trouble.
So it's Coinbase.
It's probably Coinbase. The question is, again, I don't think BlackRock goes through all this with NASDAQ unless the SEC told them, yeah, Coinbase is of significant size. Because if the SEC simply said, I get it, it's a great idea, but Coinbase isn't of significant size, why would they bother to do this? Now remember, Larry Fink also said 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, might have been 4 or 5, sorry, time's flying, we would never do a Bitcoin ETF. So they have a lot riding on this. Their reputation, they've just done an about face. If the SEC gets annoyed, that's bad. And also there's probably gonna be a ton of filings that follow them. And so that's going to further agitate the SEC if they're not into approving them. So it just doesn't make sense for them to do this unless they had a bunch of ducks in a row that they thought through with even the SEC itself.
You mentioned that they wouldn't do this with Binance because Binance is kind of in trouble with the SEC, but Coinbase is in a bit of trouble with the SEC. They also just got allegedly sued or allegedly are doing something illegal. Does that make sense to you? It doesn't make sense to any of us.
Yeah. So what I was hearing was that BlackRock already uses Coinbase as their custodian.
Okay.
And I believe that part of the business was fine. And so there's somebody who had a theory that in the SEC investigating Coinbase, BlackRock got involved. And this is where all this kind of was born out of.
I see.
There's even more theory that this is getting into sort of speculative tinfoil hat stuff, but there's more speculation that the SEC actually wants to push, like kind of wants to create winners and losers in this, and sort of show that the future is more BlackRock than Binance or crypto exchanges, and have BlackRock maybe even drive some of this moving of crypto from the sort of locals to the more mainstream companies that have lawyers all over, that follow all the rules, yada, yada. So that kind of matches up with the SEC's recent moves towards some of these exchanges and, sort of regulating because there's no real framework yet. They're more just targeting the problems they see.
Yep.
Anyway, that's another sort of theory I see batted around. And the other theory is whether maybe BlackRock knows that the SEC might lose the Grayscale case. And they're going to front run that or be ready when the case gets lost, and then all of a sudden that opens the door to Bitcoin ETFs. That one I'm a little less keen on. I don't know if they would do that. Plus, I think that would get them into a position where, like, did you know something that nobody else did? I think in this other situation, it's more of just NASDAQ moving towards a place. BlackRock is like, wait, you know what, this might work for us. It might have just been like the idea just sort of fell into place by some of this communication between these entities.
I saw a ton of bad takes on this. I want to get your expert opinion because this is your world, the ETF world, that this is not actually a Bitcoin ETF. This is a trust. And everyone has in their mind that a Bitcoin trust is a bad thing because Grayscale has been such a failed product. This was labeled a trust. Is it an ETF? Does it impact the price the same? Like, what's your thoughts on what is this thing? Is this a real Bitcoin spot ETF?
Yes.
Point blank.
Yeah. If you're out there, just accept my yes. Okay. That said, in ETFs, if you like gold, a commodity that's a single commodity, you can't put that into the 1940 Act in a mutual fund wrapper. Mutual funds by design have to be diversified. Mm-hmm. So holding one thing isn't diversified, right? So back in the day, they were looking for a creative way to put gold in an ETF. And they said, well, we could use this grantor trust structure. Everything else would be very similar to the ETF. Creations and redemptions can happen. But this structure would go under the 1933 Act, which is a little less regulatory. It's a little easier to get through that act. 40 Act's more like for mutual funds. You know, if you go through the 40 Act, you're ready for like middle America, right? And for somebody's retirement account. 33 Act is get a little more sketchy, not sketchy, but like a little more liberal of a filing. So gold went through there, and then SLV went through there. And then over the years, there's been dozens of products that go as grantor trusts. But they look, feel, act, smell like an ETF. And GLD is a great example. It's 20 years old. It's tracked the price of gold great. And that's because you can do creations and redemptions with the underlying. So if the GLD starts to get away from the underlying price of gold, somebody can arb that by selling GLD and buying the gold, or vice versa, right? That arbitrage is the secret sauce that keeps ETFs prices close to their value. That's what you do not have with GBTC, which is also a trust, but a different kind of trust, a private trust that happens to have limited shares that trade over the counter. In that case, because you can't, there's no creation or redemption mechanism here, those shares simply trade on their own and they deviate from the price of Bitcoin because they're now their own thing. But if GBTC was an ETF, somebody would arb that difference that you see there and make a risk-free profit. But you can't do that there. So even though they're both trust, I get why people are like kind of, skeptical, but no need to be. It's an ETF. Sometimes people call them ETPs or ETVs because they're not technically a fund, but they're in the ETF umbrella. They're going to work like one. This is the real deal. Nothing to worry about in terms of like, is that a big difference that it's a trust and not a fund? Okay,
thanks for clearing that up. I saw that's the recent debate on Twitter. Crypto is the only place where the largest asset manager in the world can come in and say, we're going to launch an ETF, and people say, no, not that kind of ETF. We need a different ETF. Like, guys, we're missing the point here.
I'd like to get your take on this. What do you think that skepticism is about? My theory is, do you think it's either crypto bears who are short crypto, or is it people who have once bitten, twice shy, and they've seen the ETF thing be like a boy who cries wolf? Because there's been like several cycles of like, oh, there's all these filings, and then boom, they get let down, they're rejected.
Yeah.
Do you think they're trying to protect themselves, almost like a hurt lover, where they're just not going to buy in this time emotionally?
That's probably part of it. I think there's three things. Some of it is that in the past year, everyone is so skeptical of every centralized company in crypto. And like, if we start believing in a thing that's going to bring us higher prices, whether it's FTX, whether it's this new fund, whether it's Elon Musk that buys in and then sells, it's this idea that a big traditional finance player comes in, they're just going to screw us over. I think that plays a role. I think the second thing is within the Bitcoin world, there's like a smaller subsection, which is maximalists, and they have this religious cult around eating meat. You can't own altcoins. You have to listen to this type of music. I mean, it goes deep, dude. Like you have to tweet a certain way. You can't be friends with this guy. And one of their beliefs is just that everything TradFi is bad. And it's rooted in I think, they're trying to do the right thing, right? They're trying to lead people in the right direction in that you should own Bitcoin, do it in a cheap way, don't pay fees on it, hold your own keys, don't lose it to some company. But at the same time, I think they kind of missed the point. And then the third thing is, as you said, we've had 100 ETF filings in the past 4 years. It's become a joke in a way. Like Fidelity will file, a new company will file. I used to get excited 2 or 3 years ago that everyone. I mean, before now, some of this new news is coming out about why this one could actually pass. It's usually just a nothing burger. It's always a sell the news event. No one expects it to actually pass, and so no one wants to get let down again.
Yeah, I think all three of those make sense to me. And the Bitcoin purists remind me of the passive world, where you've got the bogleheads who are like, you have to do 3 funds and that's it, and why would you ever trade ever?
Sure.
Then there's variations. There's some people who like to add a little smart beta, maybe a little, they're just, so it's almost like it's very similar where there's a Puritan, I guess, wing of the thing. So that makes sense to me. And I think, the idea of, it is interesting. There is somewhat of a irony there about, well, Bitcoin's this outsider currency, but here's a big institution embracing it. Do I like that or not? I get it.
Yeah,
I can see this sort of push-pull there with that. But here's the thing. If you want it more widely adopted, then you should root for this because there's $26 trillion that advisors manage for people, right? So people who have a lot of money and they want help managing it, so that's called an advisor. $26 trillion is a ton of money, right? They are probably only going to use an ETF to get Bitcoin. Now, they wouldn't have, even if they put 1% of their collective assets, that's 2.6 trillion. That's a pretty big deal. I mean, is that 2.6 trillion? Did I get that right?
No, 10%.
That's 10%. Sorry.
That's a big number.
I knew that
I would put 10%. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not saying they shouldn't do that. Let's put that on the record.
Instead of me trying to figure out what 1% is, I think it's 260 billion. But I think let's do if they put 5%, right? You're talking about $1 trillion or $2 trillion.
Yes.
In other words, it's just a lot of money. And so those people are the kind of people who love iShares and Vanguard. And so if they have iShares label on something, they trust it. Huge. I'm telling you. And they trust the ETF. So this is almost like a portal that opens up to all of this boomer conservative money. Whereas if you don't want any of that going on, then you shouldn't root for this because this is like an opening to a huge swath of the country and certain money that probably would never buy crypto or even use an exchange, a crypto exchange for that matter. So that's the big thing here. The other thing is if you get a Bitcoin ETF and it gets going like GLD, so many people, even some of the biggest institutions, will trade GLD. They don't want to deal with going and buying gold and storing it or anything like that. So GLD you can trade for 1 basis point. That's how much the spread is. I mean, it's basically free to trade. This is going to be like that. So think if we had I don't know, IBIT, right? Let's just say the ticker's IBIT. It's going to trade, $1 billion a day. That means the spread will be 1 basis point. The fees probably, I would guess, between 50 and 70 basis points at first. But then you'll have competition, which will bring that down. So, you're looking at a couple of years from now, basically real low cost expense ratio, basically free to trade. That is a really compelling value proposition, especially for a lot of people who just don't want to deal with the underlying market.
Right.
And that's how ETFs have stolen business from derivatives, mutual funds, single stocks. Of course, not everybody will do this, but it's certainly going to offer a lot of convenience and lower fees for this. And so it's powerful. ETFs are a powerful disruptive force. So if I'm a crypto person, I would just look at it like that. But again, but there's nothing that, I don't see BlackRock will never own the crypto. The crypto will be owned by millions of people who BlackRock's just sort of holding it for them. They're sort of the middle person, but the crypto will be custodied. And so, like, let's say even BlackRock, let's say Larry Fink just went wild and he did a SBF. It doesn't matter. The person still has access to the crypto because it's stored with the custodian.
Sure.
That's why ETFs are popular, is because they trade like futures, but they're backed physically.
Yeah, I don't think we can survive another SBF. We only need one of those in crypto's history.
Yeah, I think one's enough.
One's plenty. Yeah, man. I kind of view this as the holy grail for Bitcoin. I don't see a bigger catalyst for price. I think it's undeniably good. I don't really understand. I can see some slight angle why purists are mad and TradFi's getting in and some bank and asset managers getting rich. I just don't get it. I think that's a very small subset of people. I think the vast majority of people invest in things because they want the price to go up. They want to make money. And I fall into that subset of people. And a lot of people that watch this fall into that subset of people. And this is good for price. There's no other way to view this.
It's hard to say whether, okay, the ETF comes out, the price should go right up. But
how much do you think it would go up?
It's hard to say. Like, I remember when the Winklevoss filed,
yeah,
the price like shot right up, right? But the price was more volatile. There was less volume.
Mm-hmm.
I think the price is harder to move these days because
yeah,
there's so much volume. But you can't deny over time, if something gets opened up to more people, it's probably going to help the price a little. Mm-hmm. Gold certainly had a pretty good run in the 10 years after GLD came out. There are other factors involved here. Like, let's say the ETF comes out, but there is an SBF. That would probably overwhelm a lot of this.
Yeah.
So, or let's just say the Fed starts hiking again, which seems to hurt Bitcoin a little bit because it's like a risk asset or trades like one. That's probably going to overwhelm this. So to me, this is like a long-term catalyst, but it'd be hard to play this because there are other variables that could usurp this.
Yep.
But I don't see how opening this up to more people would be bad for price over a longer stretch.
I want to understand a little bit more. You tweeted out that BlackRock has a 157-to-1 approval versus denial rating when they try to get an ETF passed. And then someone tweeted out the number of Bitcoin ETFs that have passed, and it's like 60 or 0-70. So we have like the best pitcher in the MLB going against the best batter, a home run slugger. Is that normal for a company to get all their ETFs passed? Like, is BlackRock the best in the business, or is it 50-50?
First of all, I'm going to meme that somehow. I got to figure out the right meme, but you're right. That is a killer matchup, and that's why everybody and myself is so drawn to this. There's this. It's like a heavyweight fight between two undefeated boxers, right?
It is.
Yeah. Sorry, I lost your question and all that.
The question is this normal? Like, is BlackRock the outlier, or the 157-1? Like, they're Floyd Mayweather, or is everyone just
they're 575-1?
575-1.
Well, granted, a lot of them are normal 40 Act funds. There were no they would get rejected, but I think the bigger point is like a company like Van Eck or a smaller company or ARK. Like, Van Eck has tried a couple times to get the Bitcoin ETF through. They filed for an Ether futures. They're taking their shots, right? BlackRock isn't like a shot taker like that. They're much more calculated. So it isn't normal for that kind of a matchup to happen. I almost feel like BlackRock wouldn't go against somebody who's 60-0 unless they knew how they could win.
Right, they pick their fights.
Yeah, like they're not just randomly going to go and just sort of like throw themselves into a fight they can't win. That's my take. That's why my percentage went from 1 to over 30 just on the name alone, BlackRock, and their reputation.
When will we find out, do you think, if this gets passed? And is it February of next year?
I think the earliest might be. No, I think 45 days is the earliest.
Oh,
but
really?
It could be kicked back. Yeah, I think. But you have to also understand that every now and then, I think, we've seen if the SEC is just into it, it can happen pretty quickly. Like,
yeah.
But I don't know is the answer. I'd say if I had to give you a range, maybe anywhere from a month and a half, month and a half to 6 months.
Okay.
But again, if BlackRock set all this up ahead of time, it could happen quickly, because what's the point of even having the file sitting there? You don't need to delay it. The SEC had a habit of delaying some of these for a while.
Yeah.
And then when there was no room to delay after like 260 days, they finally said, we're not approving it. If it gets delayed, that's bad. That would mean the SEC wasn't really into it, and it's going into this sort of traditional thing. And I think we might hear more on that in 45 days or so. Look, I would just stay tuned. I just also think the reporting going on is really good. I know we have a bunch of reporters on this. CoinDesk has done a great job. people are going to find out the story here, and the more the story is known, the more we'll have more accuracy on whether this is going to get through or not.
Yeah.
Because we're going to find out details like, did NASDAQ go to BlackRock? How did all that work? Clearly, people are talking. So we're going to, I think in the next week or so, we'll probably have pieced together most of the story and be able to come up with more accurate odds and timing even.
That's one thing we're very good at here in crypto. We haven't figured a lot out yet, but we have figured out how to tweet all day long. I mean, we have that down.
I know. It's funny. Like when I tweeted the filing, every time there's an event in the crypto space, my follower count goes up by a nice little margin there.
I was shilling you to everyone I saw. I tagged you under probably 30 threads where people were saying this is not an ETF. I said, follow him. He has the details.
And the activity is really intense too. So I enjoy the crypto crowd. They also have a sense of humor, and sometimes they're almost so into it. It can be a little funny, and some of their internal debates and the whole thing has brought some. It kind of made Wall Street more colorful, I think, because like the BlackRock filed another ETF that day, and it was a large cap income fund, and it's like like that stuff can get a little boring after a while. Like this kind of it gets like some spice. So I enjoy it, but like you do get exhausted. You gotta have to like pace yourself.
There's no long cap income Twitter. I gotta find that circle.
No, you would. I mean, or ultra short duration fixed income. Some of this stuff can be boring. I mean, it's interesting because you can make money in it and it's great, but I don't know. It's this is a much more exciting, unpredictable, fast moving area.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of unknowns and plots. So, and again, remember, the reason this is so ongoing and intense, whoever gets out first, or maybe the first two, they hit the jackpot. And there is a little bit of I would be lying if I wasn't a little sad for all the issuers that spent 10 years filing that are on the smaller side, only to have BlackRock sort of solve this, and now they're first. BlackRock has 10 trillion in assets. So this is almost like the big guy winning, even though the race had involved all the little guys for 10 years. So I don't know if there's something about that does feel a little wrong, but just the way it is, I guess.
Yeah, that's the way it is. I mean, hopefully some of those companies just hold Bitcoin. They get to participate in the upside that way. If BlackRock passes,
true.
Maybe they hold some Bitcoin. We all win. Eric, one of the things that I remember vividly was 2 years ago, must have been 2021. I'm sitting in Dubai having dinner with a couple of traders, and I saw your tweet come out about the Bitcoin futures ETF, and you saw some really tiny detail in that filing that no one else had noticed, and you said, this kind of proves like this one is the first one that has a real chance. I think this one passes. Sure enough, we find out like 24, 48 hours later that Bitcoin future ETF passed. It was going to happen. Is there a small detail that you're looking for this time, or that you've already seen that makes it different outside of it just being from BlackRock? Like what's the inside game on anything you've seen?
It's got to be this surveillance sharing agreement.
Okay.
Because even though BlackRock's big, Coinbase, and we have some, conspiracy theories on how it happened. The fact of the matter is the SEC is concerned about manipulation. And the one way to solve their concern is through surveillance sharing agreements. The SEC has mentioned these in their rejections. So if the surveillance sharing agreement, if we find out more and more that it's with, what we need is to find out who the exchange is. Is it Binance or Coinbase? If it's Coinbase, are they of significant size? And once we get that, we're going to be able to make a stronger prediction. I would probably, if somebody says Coinbase is a significant size and they maybe got a back channel through somebody at BlackRock or the SEC, I'm starting to jack up my percentages. That's what I'm looking for, because that's the brass tacks, if you will, but that's the devil in the details that has to be solved. Outside of all the glorification of BlackRock and their record and all this, that's still something that is a reality, and this kind of solves it. Again, we don't know for sure, but this is important because it does also sort of, I think, move this filing a little bit into a place other filings haven't gone.
Yep.
So that's what I'm looking for. And then the timing, the other one was easier because they had 75 days and we can kind of work that out. But we'll be out soon. I'm going to basically huddle with James, and we're going to basically try to simplify this for everybody. We're going to give you odds and a date. That way everybody can sort of like have a feeling for where we're at. That way we're not just using words like it could happen, it might happen. We're fine handicapping it, but we need a little more info first.
Are you going to set up, you could set up a betting market even. I don't know.
I know.
Well,
I already
you need an offshore exchange.
So.
Let's get an offshore exchange with significant size, set up an ETF around it, you price it.
Right. Like a bet on the Bitcoin ETF being approved. Now, me and other analysts have side bets on this. So I've already bet Todd Rosenbluth that it will be approved. Now, I bet Todd Rosenbluth about BITO. He was skeptical of that, and I won that. So, but he has had 2 straight steak dinner wins over me. So he's on a little bit of a hot streak. But our bet is that I said a spot ETF will be approved this year sometime. So I have that. He has the it won't. And so we'll see who's right. But the reason I did that, and I did that even before I saw the surveillance sharing agreement, is because I'll ride with BlackRock any day.
Yeah.
I'll hitch my bet to them, and I feel pretty comfortable. That's how, that's how big time this company is. And I just would, my money's on them.
Biggest in the world. That seems like a good spot to put your money. Before we wrap here, Eric, this is all good info. I know there's some people that are already placing their bets right now, buying more Bitcoin. I want to actually switch topics a little bit and ask your opinion on ETH, because we talked about it last year. And one of the things, I don't want to misquote you, but I thought you said that an ETH futures ETF you thought would happen before a Bitcoin spot ETF. You still think that happens?
No, not now.
Yeah.
I'm going to backpedal there because, well, again, I can't overstate how shocked the BlackRock filing was.
Yeah.
And my head's still spinning. I would never have predicted that.
Changes everything.
It just doesn't make any sense. So therefore, with that new massive variable, I would now say a spot more likely than an Ether futures. Also, remember, they just tried to do some Ether futures, and the SEC told them to get out.
Yeah.
So that's all. But those 2 things, I'd be more bullish on spot approval. But again, I don't give investment advice. I'm only just trying to handicap a race. You have to understand that we've been doing this for 10 years, and there's still no spot ETF. So you have to really take that into consideration.
Yep.
It's very possible this doesn't happen. Like I said, many new variables. There's probably good reason to get hope, but this is not a slam dunk.
I mean, I don't know. I'm already getting caught up in the hype. I need to log off of Twitter for an hour and then just only spend 23 hours a day, not 24. I'm getting excited. It's hard not to, man. It's hard not to. But
yeah, my wife calls it Twitter nonsense, and so you're like, oh, you're doing your Twitter nonsense. I'm like, it's my job.
Yeah, that's
what. Doesn't buy into that, but it's true. Twitter's the most amazing sort of public town square, sparring gym, bulletin board that you could ever find. It's unbelievable how fast we're able to get to the bottom of some of this and be on top of a breaking story like this. I think it's awesome.
I think my parents are still trying to figure that out too. Sometimes they ask me, they're like, Luke, do you need to get a job? I'm like, no, this is my job. I'm working hard. I promise.
People think Twitter is Kim Kardashian, who have not gone on Twitter. They don't really get how powerful it is for, especially if you do Twitter as part of an arm of your job. Like I told my dentist friend, I'm like, I'm sure there's dentist Twitter where they compare notes on like root canals and like argue over like what crown is better. I would do that. Like I would definitely take whatever I do in my job and get involved in that wing of Twitter, and you'll get smarter for sure. And you'll meet contacts and make more friends.
Yeah, there's an incubation or a VC fund for everything. I think it'd be fascinating just to start up an incubation that just funds almost Twitter accounts in each niche. You have the long dated income. We could get that one going. It's going to be small, but it could work. Dental Twitter,
long cap income.
There's untapped potential everywhere in the Twitter world.
Sure.
Eric, I appreciate you doing this, man. I'm bullish. Some people are already buying Bitcoin. Let me know when you open up your casino. We can place bets on the ETF passing if you're not already betting enough on Bitcoin. But you're always the best resource to follow for this ETF stuff. So if you're listening, if you're watching, go follow him. Stay in the know. And hopefully next time we talk, next year, I'm going to do our annual Bitcoin ETF call. We're at 100K. It's already passed. And we talk about something else.
I guarantee you we'll have stuff to talk about in a year. Either way, we're going to have stuff to talk about. This, in fact, when the first one gets approved, that's just the beginning of a whole nother Pandora's box.
Then we move on to ETH.
So,
Then we schedule the ETH call for 3 years.
Well, what's the other currency? And it's like, oh, here Kathy Wood's going to do active management of Bitcoin, and then it's going to be the fee wars, and then it's going to be twists.
What is the Direxy on 3x?
But they're going to sell It's going to be call options on top of Bitcoin, so you get income while you hold it. It's going to be. Watch the ETF industry going to go wild with this once it get open. That this is a very innovative industry. It's the Silicon Valley of the financial world. So there'll be tons to talk about, especially if this one gets approved. It's only the beginning.
Then we get the 3x levered. We tack on leverage. We get more coin. I mean, in a couple of years, we're going to be talking about what is it? What does your son do? He is the Roblox, the Robux.
ETF.
We're going to be doing Robux ETF 3x long income Roblox.
Yeah, that's funny. Who knows?
Who knows, man? I don't know. It's going to be exciting. I'll schedule the annual call regardless. We'll figure out what we're talking about then. Eric, always a pleasure, man. Enjoy your weekend.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.